Okay, so this is the pelvic girdle that I'm going to be working with, and first I'm going to do the abductors. So to start out, we're going to do the piriformis. It's the deepest muscle of the abductors, and it connects at the the origin is at the ilium, the anterior side of the sacrum, and then it connects at the greater trochanter of the femur, and it is responsible for lateral movement or abduction. And then we have our gluteus minimus, which connects at the top of the ilium or the ala of the ilium, and it can the origins at the ala of the ilium, and the insertion is at the greater trochanter. And this is responsible, of course, for abduction as well, and then lateral movement of the thigh. So this pretty much just moves the whole hip joint, all these muscles. And then the gluteus medius connects at the ilium as well, and goes down to the greater trochanter of the femur as well, and it's responsible for abduction of the thigh, lateral movement. And then we have our glutamus maximus, our main part of our booty, and it starts at the iliac crest, or the ala, and it goes all the way down to the iliotibial band, or the but midway down the femur, actually more closer to the greater trochanter, but just a little further down than the rest of the abductor muscles of the pelvic girdle. And then we have our psoas major, which connects at T12, so the origin is at T12, and it goes all the way down to the lesser trochanter. And this is actually the main part of this muscle is for flexion. So and it also affects the lower back too. So when my lower back hurts, it's mostly because of my psoas muscle, my psoas major. And then the iliacus starts in the ilium fascia, and connects and inserts down at the lesser trochanter of the femur, and it is responsible for a flexion of the thigh, and it does laterally rotate a little bit, but that's not its main. Okay, so there is one that I forgot for the pelvic girdle. It's the IT band, or the tensor fasciae latae, and it connects at the iliac crest, and it goes all the way down and actually turns into the tendon, or the IT band, and connects at the lesser trochanter of the tibia. And then now I'm going to move on to the adductors. So our adductors are all right in here, and they are responsible for bringing the leg inward. So when I ride incorrectly or I squeeze with my knees, it hurts right there, and it shouldn't, because I shouldn't be squeezing with my knees. So the pectineus, it starts at the pubic bone, right? The pubis, right? Yeah, okay. The pubis, and it goes down to the femur, the tuberosity of the femur, and then the adductor brevis starts also at the pubis and goes down to the tuberosity of the femur, same as the abductor longus. So these are all responsible for adducting the thigh. And then we have our adductor magnus, and this one goes down further along the tuberosity of the femur, so it connects a little bit lower, but it also does start a little bit further back on the pubis.
All right, I'm doing the deep muscles of the back. We have the spinalis here that originates on the spinous processes of the thoracic and some cervical and some lumbar vertebra, and it inserts on the upper thoracic and upper lumbar spinous processes as well. Its main function is extension of the spine. We have the longismus right next to it on both sides, and that originates on the transverse processes of vertebra in the thoracic spine and lumbar spine, and it inserts along there as well, along the transverse processes. Its main function is extension of the spine and lateral flexion. And then just outside of the longismus is the iliocostalis, and this originates on the transverse processes of the cervical spine, and it goes all the way down to the sacrum here, and it inserts on the fascia of the ribs, and its main function is extension of the spine and also lateral flexion, just like the longismus. Underneath here we have the serratus posterior superior. The main function of this muscle is to bring the rib cage up when you inhale, when it inserts on lower cervical and upper thoracic spinous processes of the vertebra, it extends out to ribs 2 through 5, and that's where it inserts. And then we have the serratus posterior inferior, which does the opposite. It depresses the ribs when you exhale, and this inserts on some thoracic and lumbar vertebra and inserts on ribs 9 through 12. Go.
Okay, so first we're going to do the anterior thigh. So we have the sartorius, and this is the longest muscle in our body. It's also known as a talar muscle. And this starts at the anterior superior of the iliac spine, the origin, and it goes all the way down, keep on going down to the proximal medial of the tibia shaft. And this is responsible for flexion. It also stabilizes the knee during extension. It laterally rotates. It has a lot of movements, but we put flexion as one of the main actions. And then we have our gracilis muscle, which starts at the pubis, the radius pubis, and it goes all the way down to the proximal medial shaft, but it does insert higher than the sartorius. And this is responsible for abduction. So my little skeleton man won't really move, but just the inward motion of the thigh, like aerobics class. And then we have the rictus femoris, which inserts on the inferior of the iliac spine. And it inserts down at the patella, and it actually connects onto this tendon here, the patella tendon, and that inserts on the front side of the tibia. And then we have so this is all the quadriceps group, and it is responsible for extension of the thigh. So the rictus femoris is that big muscle when you flex the thigh. Now we have our vastus group, I like to call it. So for our vastus lateralis, it inserts on the lateral side of the greater trochanter, and the insertion is also at the patella, and then it connects to the patella ligament. So these each have their own ligament. It's not just one, and then it connects down below the patella. And then we have our vastus intermedius, and that the origin is the femur anterolateral shaft, the surface of the shaft, and this goes all the way down to the same insertion, and here is the tendon once again. And then we have our vastus medialis, and this origin is on the medial side of the intertrochanteric line, sorry if I say that wrong, and it also connects to the tendon of the patella. And yeah, that's it for the 4 quadriceps group.
All right, we're gonna look at some more muscles on the back. Right on top here we have the trapezius, which originates right up at the occipital bone, and it continues to originate all the way down through the thoracic and lower thoracic spine. It inserts at the occipital bone in the acromion and medial spine of the scapula. And the trapezius has a lot of different functions. It's used for extension of the spine, flexion, lateral flexion, and then bringing your shoulders up, and also some rotation with the scapula. Then right below that we have the splenius capitis. This originates on lower cervical and upper thoracic spine, and it inserts at the occipital bone. This is used for extension and lateral flexion of the neck and spine, and also some rotation. Then we have the splenius cervicis right below it, which originates on upper thoracic and inserts on upper cervical spine. And this muscle is used for extension and rotation and lateral flexion of the neck and spine. And then we have the semispinalis capitis that actually runs like this. So it inserts at lower cervical, upper thoracic, or originates, and then it inserts at the occipital temporal bones. And this one is used for extension of the neck only. And then finally on the back we have the latissimus dorsi, which originates on the spine. It actually runs down here from the thoracic through the lumbar and the sacrum, and it inserts at the top of the humerus, and the latissimus dorsi is used for extension of the spine, medial rotation of the arm, and adduction of the arm. And that's it for the back.
Go ahead.
All right, we're going to move to the scapula now. We're going to start up here with the supraspinatus, which runs from the supraspinous fossa of the scapula to the greater tubercle of the humerus, and this is responsible for abduction of the arm. Then we have the infraspinatus, which goes from the infraspinous fossa of the scapula to the greater tubercle again of the humerus, and that's responsible for some extension and lateral rotation of the humerus. Then we have the subscapularis, which is we actually have on our other scapula here. That runs from the subscapulus fossa of the scapulus to the lesser tubercle of the humerus up here, and so it's on this inside part of the scapula, and that helps with medial rotation of the arm. Then we have the teres minor that goes from the lateral border of the scapula to the lesser tubercle of the humerus, and that helps with I believe it's lateral rotation of the arm. The teres major goes from the inferior angle of the scapula as well as the lateral border to the medial lip of the humerus. And the teres major has a lot of functions. It helps with abduction of the arm as well as some lateral and medial rotation. Then we're going to move to the levator scapula that runs from the upper cervical spine down to the superior angle of the scapula, and the levator scapula helps with shrugging our shoulders, elevating the scapula, and doing some downwards rotation of the scapula. And then we have the two rhomboids here. The rhomboid minor runs from the cervical, actually it's C7 and T1 down to the medial border of the scapula. And then the rhomboid major, we have the upper thoracic vertebra, so it's T2 through T5, and it also goes to the medial border of the scapula. And these two help with rotation of the scapula.
Great.
Go.
Okay, so I'm going to do the posterior thigh and the lower leg. So for the posterior thigh, we have our biceps femoris, and it connects on the ischium tuberosity, and then it also connects on the femur, lateral lip of the femur, and it inserts down at the fibula head. And the action is flexion, so it allows the leg to be flexed like so. And then we have our semimembranosus, and the semimembranosus inserts at the ischium, and I think it's ischium tuberosity, and the semitendinosus enters in the same place at the ischium tuberosity. And the semimembranosus goes all the way down to the fibula, and it actually inserts at the tibial, at the tibia. Sorry, the tibia medial condyle. Blinked out for a second. So the semitendinosus actually turns into a tendon, and it inserts at the same place of the tibia proximedial tuberosity. I think that's what it is. And so I'm going to go over now to the calf muscles of the lower leg. So to start us out, I'm going to do the extensor digitorum longus. So the extensor digitorum longus inserts at the tibia condyle, and it actually connects to the distal phalanges 2 through 5, and this is for dorsiflexion of the foot, and it's also for extension of those toes 2 through 5. And then we have the tibialis anterior. That is the posterior shaft. Yes, the posterior shaft, and it connects at the calcaneus. And this is for flexion of the foot, so the foot can go up. And then we have I did the extensor, I haven't done the extensor hallucis longus. That one connects at the, further down on the tibia, no, sorry, it connects at the fibula actually, right there on the medial shaft, and it goes all the way down to distal phalange, the big toe. And it also is for extension of the big toe. And then we have I already did the longest, right? Yeah, the toes. And then we have our tibialis posterior, and this goes under the foot, and this connects to the metacarpals, I believe. But the origin is the tibialis posterior. The origin is the fibula, the proximal shaft of the fibula, and posterior shaft of the fibula, I'm sorry. And it goes all the way down to the metacarpals under the foot. And it is responsible for the extension of the foot, and then it also has some leeway for the flexion muscles on the top here. And then we have our flexus hallucis longus, and this one connects on the posterior of the medial shaft of the fibula, and it's for, oh no, I'm sorry, that's not what it does. It's connected to the large distal toe, and it serves as a flexor, but the insertion is on the fibula, and then the fibula tuberosity. And then we have our flexor digitorum longus, and this is the one that connects to the distal phalanges of 2 through 5, and it actually goes behind the heel here, and it goes all the way up and it inserts in the same place as the flexor hallucis longus. No, sorry, lower down on the fibula as the flexor digitorum. The flexor hallucis longus. Okay, so now we have the gastrocnemius, and this has 2 different insertions. It is on the bellies of these. What's the bellies called? The medial and the lateral belly, and then it connects all the way down to the heel. So the insertion is the calcaneus, and this is responsible for flexion of the foot and flexion of the lower leg. And then we have our soleus, and the soleus inserts at the tibula and fibula. So the tibula, it's the proximal posterior shaft, and the fibula is it's the posterior shaft, and it also connects at the calcaneus. And this is responsible for flexion as well. This is the muscle that will get really sore if you go from cushioned running shoes to like flat shoes. They'll be sore for like 2 weeks because this muscle isn't long enough, and it needs to be stretched to get really sore. And then the peroneus fibulus longus, there's the peroneus fibulus longus, and then the peroneus fibulus brevis. And the peroneus fibulus longus, the origin is the head, proximal head of the fibula, and it connects down to the distal phalanges 1 and 2 essentially. And it is the flexion of the foot and the ankle. And that's all for that part of the leg.
Alright, I'm going to be going over some muscles of the arm. We're going to start up here with the biceps brachii. It goes from the scapula all the way down to the medial shaft of the ulna. Radius. It goes down to the radius, and all of these muscles I'm going to be talking about deal with flexion of the arm, so that helps with flexion at the elbow. The brachialis lies right under it, and that goes from the medial shaft of the humerus down to the top of the ulna. also helps with flexion. And then inside here we have a flexor, but it's also an adductor called the coracobrachialis, and that goes from the top of the scapula down to the medial shaft of the humerus. Then we have our flexors in our forearm.
Now go.
We're going to start with the flexors of the forearm now. There's a few that originate at the medial epicondyle of the humerus, so I'll start with those. We have the flexor carpi ulnaris that starts there, and it inserts down at the metacarpals 5 and 4, and that's on the ulnar side. Then we have the flexor carpi radialis that originates at the medial epicondyle of the humerus and goes down to metacarpals 1 and 2. And then the palmaris longus again originates at the medial epicondyle of the humerus and moves down. That goes down straight to the palm though. And those all deal with flexion. Underneath those we also have the flexor digitorum profundus, and that goes from the middle of the bottom of the humerus down into the metacarpal 5. And below this we have 2 pronator muscles. The pronator quadratus spans down the distal shaft of the ulna and radius, so it kind of goes between them. And the pronator teres starts up at the medial epicondyle of the humerus again, but it goes down to the radius. And both of those muscles help with pronation of the arm. And then we have the brachioradialis that starts at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus and goes down to the bottom of the radius, and again dealing with flexion. And then the flexor pollicis longus, and this goes from the middle of the radius down to phalange 1, or the thumb in other words, and helps with flexion of the arm on the thumb side. That's it.
I hope you can see this. I'm my own cameraman right now. So I'm going to do the rest of the forearm. So we have the supinator that inserts at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and then it inserts at the posterior shaft of the radius, and this acts to supinate the arm, the forearm. And then we have our abductor pollis longus, and the abductor pollis longus inserts at the posterior shaft of the ulna, and it inserts down at metacarpal 1, down here next to the thumb. And this acts to abduct the thigh, abduct the thumb as well as abduct the wrist. And then we have our extensor pollis brevis, and this one inserts at the distal posterior of the radius right here, and then the origin is the distal posterior of the radius, and then it inserts down at the proximal phalanx of the thumb, and this acts to extend the thumb. And then we have our abductor pollis longus, and this one inserts at the medial posterior of the ulna, and it goes down to the same area as the brevis, the extensor pollis brevis. It goes to the proximal phalanx of the thumb as well, and this acts to extend the thumb. And then we have our extensor indicis, and this one is our is the distal posterior of the ulna, is the origin, and then it inserts down at the base of the index finger, so down at the bottom of the pointer finger, and this actually acts to extend the pointer finger. Okay, so to finish up the forearm, I'm going to start with the extensor carpi radialis longus, and this starts at the lateral supracondyle ridge of the humerus, and then it inserts down at the base of metacarpal 2, and it acts to extend the wrist. And then we have the let's do this one, extensor carpi radialis brevis, and this one inserts at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and it goes down to metacarpal 3. It acts to extend the wrist as well. And then we are going to do our extensor digiti minimi lateral. The origin is the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and then it goes down to the phalange number 5, so the pinky, and it actually acts to extend the pinky. Can't really read it on this guy. And then we have the extensor carpi ulnaris, and this one also inserts at the lateral epicondyle of the humerus, and it inserts down at the base of metacarpal 5, and this one works to also extend the wrist as well. Okay, so now I'm going to do the abdomen area. So first we're going to start with our rectus abdominis, and the rectus abdominis starts at the pubic crest, and then it inserts at the sphenoid process of the sternum, and this acts to compress the ribs and flex the spine. And then we have our transverse abdominis, and the transverse abdominis inserts behind the rectus abdominis, and so it inserts back here at the interior lumbar fascia, and then it originates in the anterior lumbar fascia, and then it inserts at the abdominal aponeurosis of the linea alba, alba, and then the internal oblique. The internal oblique starts at ribs. The origin, actually, sorry, is down here. The origin is down in the iliac crest, so it would be specifically the lumbar fascia as well, and then the insertion is ribs 10 through 12, and this acts to compress the abdomen. It laterally rotates the spine from side to side, and it also does rotation in the same direction. And then we have our external obliques, and these kind of intertwine and weave between the last 8 ribs, and then the insertion is on the pubic crest, and this has a lot of the same movements as the internal oblique, so it flexes the spine, moves the spine from side to side. The only difference is that it rotates in the opposite direction. You can't see my whole body, but it rotates in the opposite direction if this man would move. So that's it for the abdominal area. Okay, so now I'm going to do the thorax, and I'm sorry about the angle. I can't quite get it high enough so that you can see everything, but I hope I'm able to explain it well enough. So first we're going to start off with the internal intercostals. It's right in here. And the internal intercostals originate on the superior border of the ribs, and then they insert at the inferior border of the ribs, and they bring the rib cages down and together. And then the external intercostals insert, it's the opposite, so the inferior border of the ribs, and then they originate in inferior border of the ribs and insert at the superior border of the ribs, and these acts to bring the rib cage apart. And then why don't we go to the pectoralis major, and the pectoralis major inserts at the medial of the clavicle, and it goes through the cartilages of ribs 1 through 6, and then it inserts at the intertubulocular of the humerus. I know, I totally butchered that. And then we have our pectoralis minor, and the pectoralis minor inserts at the coracoid process of the scapula, and it goes down through ribs 3 through 5, and the minor acts to depression of the scapula. It acts as to depress the scapula, and then the major also acts to adduct the scapula, so to bring it down. Also, the pectoralis major acts to rotate the humerus as well. And then we go to the serratus anterior, and the serratus anterior that originates at ribs 1 through 9 here. I can't see it. Ribs 1 through 9, and it acts as The serratus anterior originates at ribs 1 through 9, and then it inserts at the medial border of the scapula on the front side, looking forward, the anterior side, and then this acts to abduction of the scapula. So it will bring the scapula up. And then next we have our diaphragm, which is one of my favorite muscles. So the diaphragm inserts, the origin is at the sternum. It also inserts at the lower part of the lumbar. Sorry, the origin is the lower part of the lumbar, and then it inserts at the diaphragm tendon. So it doesn't actually insert on a bone. And then the diaphragm acts to expand the ribs so that when you take a deep breath in, the ribs do open up. And this is a muscle that strengthens a lot for singers. So that is the thorax.